Eryka, this past week, I have heard 3 different people on 3 different forums refer to Bitcoin as Tulip Mania. So for people who do not know what Tulip Mania is, can you explain that to us? And how does Bitcoin fall into being called Tulip Mania? How would you address that?
Well, first of all, Bitcoin is definitely not tulips. Bitcoin is technology, open source, global. Tulips are very local. They're a flower, to those who don't know. So I think it's just people trying to create FUD who maybe don't understand the technology. But Tulip Mania is around the 17th century. It's a market bubble in which the price of the flower just increased pretty much due to speculation by Dutch investors, and it resulted in a pretty large market crash. People say that it affected the Dutch economy, but when you look deeper into it, that's been debunked. It did not really affect the Dutch economy at all, but it's just that prices grew. It says the prices exceeded the average annual income by 6 times, and the rarest tulip bulbs became the most expensive items on the planet. When people make this comparison, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the tulip story is kind of a story more than anything else, based in a story to tell a story more than it's based in reality. It's kind of been debunked, but Bitcoin is definitely not a flower.
So you would say it's not related at all, is really your point with that.
Yeah, and it makes for a good story, but one of the features behind Bitcoin is that it has a limited supply. Tulips obviously don't have a limited supply. One of the other features behind Bitcoin is it has a controlled inflation schedule. You can time even almost down to the minute as to when new Bitcoins will be added to the environment. I mean, there's math and open source code that's backing it versus tulips, which is you can grow them. Tulips are pretty common at the stores where you can buy them. So the fact that Tulip Mania even happened, if it did happen, is a little bit ridiculous. And flowers, chocolate, like these things are not good money. But Bitcoin is rooted in sound money. I do want to show a picture. I mean, and also too, it's like Bitcoin, when people refer to it as the .com bubble, that's a little bit more accurate. You did see that a lot of companies did well during the .com bubble. There was a huge crash, and of that .com bubble, let's say less than 2% of those companies still exist and were probably bought out over time. I mean, there's that same thing that's happening with Bitcoin. I mean, and I'm not even going to say Bitcoin, because Bitcoin kind of became mainstreamed in, let's say, 2013. The blockchain and cryptocurrencies, they became mainstream in, like, let's say 2016 and 17. From that era, all of those different blockchain companies that were released, those are the ones that I would say are probably more comparable to the .com bubble. A lot of those projects some of them were scams, some of them were just too early for their time, and some of them, just couldn't get funding the way that a company should in order to be successful. So if there is anything that is a bubble, I would say it's more blockchain, not Bitcoin. And it's a lot of the companies that are built using the technology of blockchain. But Bitcoin itself has been running since 2009. It's definitely continuing to plug away. And even in times of, let's say, market unclarity, the hash power gets stronger, the user base gets stronger, the amount of people that are transacting on the network, the daily transaction goes up. So the fundamentals continue to grow, even though the price might be down.
Yeah, and it's really comparing apples to oranges, Bitcoin to tulips. Tulips are still around, Bitcoin's still around, but that's about the only similarity.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to show a picture really fast, though. Let me see if I can share my screen. So we'll share this screen that I found when I knew we were going to be talking about this. So it just shows the trajectory of some of these different entities: Bitcoin, NASDAQ during the .com bubble, tulips. We have tulips right here. There was a peak, but it definitely crashed and went away. And then, yeah, here's the NASDAQ, and here's Bitcoin, which continues to grow over time. I mean, everything really is relative. People say, like, oh, are you sad that you lost money? And I'm like, well, I didn't buy Bitcoin when it was $69,000, so exactly. Everything is relative. when you see that Bitcoin started trading at 5 cents on the open markets, and now here we are at 16,800. Everything definitely is relative.
Exactly. And that was a point I was going to mention too, where Bitcoin started and where it is now, it's still a huge difference. So, all right. Well, thank you for clearing up Tulip Mania and versus Bitcoin for us, Eryka.
Yeah, there's a book by Anne Goldar, who it's called Tulip Mania, Money, Honor, and Knowledge in the Dutch Golden Age. And it talks about Tulip Mania, and it's much less, let's say, sensational than the accounts that we've heard so far. So I would say if anybody really is interested in that, they should take a look at that book. She does a really good job at putting the actual facts and not just stories.